Hello everyone, welcome to the session. So just give me one moment. Let me just confirm if I'm online. Just give me one moment. Alright, so let's begin. Alright, so today's class, what we're going to see is we're going to see some important, what are the important questions from semiconductor electronic devices. Alright, hello Afsha. Right, so before we begin, my name is Mohana. I'm a physics educator here at Unacademy. So I have my master's degree in physics. I'm a plus verified educator. Right, you can follow me through my Telegram channel, and this you can follow the common ICSE and ISE board Telegram channel as well. So okay, you're Hamdan. Hi, hello Hamdan. So the purpose of this today's class is very simple. Okay, so you know, right, for your board exams, out of 70 marks, right, out of 70 marks, 7 marks, is from semiconductor devices. Totally 7 marks. Usually what students tend to see is they leave it for the last minute, or what they tend to see is they would not give much importance to this particular topic at all. But here is your plus. Because this whole topic, right, from this unit you will get for 7 marks. Total questions you will get is from for 7 marks, and also most of the questions, if you see, there is no numerical, only concept. So it's only theory based questions, and it's very easy. So here you go, there is a chance for you to get this complete 7 marks from this particular unit. Okay, so make sure you learn this unit. Do not leave it till the last minute. If you're doing the revision, that's okay, complete this unit first, because it's 7 marks and the theory part is very easy. You just have to conceptually understand few certain questions. Now, when it comes to electronic devices, what are the most important question you can expect from this particular electronic devices? Very simple. First thing you can see is you will be asked, what are the types? What are the types of semiconductors? So you have intrinsic semiconductors and you have extrinsic semiconductors, right? This is one question you can expect. What are the types of semiconductors? Another important question you can expect is, for example, for 1 marks or 2 marks, you can expect something like, what is doping? What is an intrinsic semiconductor, right? You can expect something like, what is doping? What is intrinsic semiconductor? What is extrinsic semiconductors? Give at least, 1 or 2 differences between the types of intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductors. So what we know from the types of semiconductors, we will be learning about these in detail right away, Now, other than this, from semiconductors, what are the types that we know? Very simple. With respect to types of semiconductors, we have pure or intrinsic semiconductors, and we also have extrinsic semiconductors. From here it's very simple. Extrinsic semiconductors, you dope the intrinsic semiconductor to get extrinsic semiconductor. From extrinsic semiconductors, there are 2 types. Depending on how you dope it, how you add the impurities, you have N-type, as well as P-type. So this is one important part. Make sure you go through it. Anything from this topic, any topic you take from this particular chapter is important. Unit 9, go through it completely. Especially these are something you can completely pay attention to. Very theory part. If you ask me, you spend 2 days on it, you will be able to study, but do not leave it till the last minute. You need to understand the concept, then revise it. Any day when you are answering any questions, one thing you have to make sure is you have to make sure to give keywords. If you give any definition you're giving, it's okay. Make sure all the keywords are there in the definition. Alright, that's one more important point you have to take into picture. 7 marks is from this unit, and you can get the whole 7 marks. So make sure you give importance to this unit. Do not leave till the last minute. What is the next expected question? Obviously energy gap, right? Or energy band gaps or band gaps. In solids, energy band gap diagrams in solid. Very important. Go through it. Very simple also. So make sure you go through these questions first. This is from first part. After this, what else can you explain? You can get question based on p-n junction. What is a p-n junction, or how is p-n junction formed? What is depletion region? What is potential barrier? For 1 mark question, you can get something like, for a 2 mark question, you can be asked, what is the definition for depletion region? What is the definition for, the potential barrier? Then obviously the next important part will become, what are rectifiers, especially your half wave and full wave rectifiers. Then application based on this PN junction diodes, LED, solar cells, okay, that yeah, those are also importance, but you can give them a little bit least importance than the other. Doesn't mean you have to skip the topic. You are obviously going to learn those topics as well, but make sure these you learn completely thoroughly. Do not skip any of this particular topic. Okay, given all of this in mind, so what we are going to do in today's class is, let's try and cover these topics. And yes, if you have any doubts, you can ask. And also, if there's any other class you want me to take on the YT channel, you can drop it in the chat box as well. Okay, alright. So, let's begin today's class. So, basic definition of what is an electronic device. See, any device you take, okay, and if you can, and if this actions, okay, of any device, if it's based on some controlled flow of electrons, that is basically an electronic device. Okay, the study of such devices is basically we called it as the branch of physics which deals with such devices. These are called as electronics. Okay, and if you see these electronics, in this case, the electronic devices are the building blocks of any circuit to take. Electronic devices are the building block. So the basic idea is, what are the types of electronic devices? This you may not ask in your question wise, but then this is some basic you need to understand. Okay, so your types of electronic devices are very simple. You have solid state electronic devices, vacuum tubes. Okay, under this vacuum tubes is where you have this particular elements like triodes, diodes, okay, type vacuum devices. Okay, these are actually not much in use today. So from vacuum devices only, because compared to vacuum devices, solid state electronic devices had more advantage. Nowadays whatever we use, your computers, your phones, all of them tends to be based on the solid state electronic devices. With respect to solid state electronic devices, we have the types. These are nothing but junction diodes, right? And we also have the ICs, right? And we also have transistors. Okay, so with respect to this here, you have only junction diodes. IC and transistors are not there. Okay, so concentrate on junction diodes as well. So every concept from this unit is important. Okay, so do not skip any of it. One part of concept we will cover in today's class. Now, basic idea. Let's just get a very basic idea. Okay, so the target of today's class is, from the 7 marks, at least for 1 or 2 marks you are prepared. Okay, now what are the classification of a semiconductor? Right, a semiconductor device is very, very simple. Alright, so semiconductor, again you can classify these semiconductors based on their thermal properties. Okay, see, if you take something like a conductor, see, if you take a conductor, what we know? Conductor will have high conductivity, but it will have low resistivity. Right, resistance is going to be low. So if you take insulator, something like a wood, okay, if you take something like a wood, an insulator or a glass or air, right, what we know from here, insulators, right, the resistivity is going to be high, but conductivity, right, conductivity is going to be low. It will not allow charges to flow through it easily. Okay, semiconductors, okay, somewhere their resistance or conductance or resistivity or conductivity is between a semiconductor and an insulator. Okay, these devices are called as semiconductors. Now, with respect to classification of semiconductors, again, this is once again for just your knowledge. Okay, see, semiconductors, if you take, okay, they are divided into 2 types. This is just for your knowledge. Okay, these are divided into elemental semiconductors, okay, and you have compound semiconductors. Okay, this compound semiconductor is further divided into organic, okay, and inorganic semiconductors. Alright, now elemental semiconductors, examples are silicon or germanium. So whatever you are going to study with respect to semiconductors, you are going to learn only about elemental semiconductors. Okay, so elemental semiconductors are they use silicon or germanium. Okay, we are only going to learn semiconductors based on those. Now, according to this, if you take an elemental semiconductor, this elemental semiconductor is again classified into 2 parts. Okay, one is basically an intrinsic semiconductor. What is an intrinsic semiconductor? Very simple. You take a pure elemental semiconductor, something like a silicon or germanium. Okay, so impurities in the semiconductor, if you're talking about impurities in a semiconductor means, so for example, let's take silicon semiconductor. Okay, so in this case, okay, out of 10 to the power of 10 parts of silicon atoms, okay, one part could belong to some other element. One part, okay, one part of the atoms in this particular compound can belong to some other elements. It could be any type of other elements, right? This is an intrinsic semiconductor, meaning they are very pure semiconductors. Okay, so silicon and germanium semiconductors, when you see, these are for basically intrinsic semiconductors. Okay, under elemental semiconductors, if you take not just silicon or germanium, you can any pure semiconductor, when the silicon or germanium conductors are not doped, okay, then they are pure semiconductors. These are intrinsic semiconductor. Now, usually when you look at intrinsic semiconductor, the idea is to increase conductivity, right? You want sure that the charges are conducting really well, right? There is conductivity because of charges, right? That is the element allows the movement of electrons, but there is a restriction to intrinsic semiconductors. Okay, its conductivity level is very low. So to combat this, we introduce a process called as doping. That is, deliberately we add impurities, okay, to this intrinsic semiconductor. What we are doing, deliberately you add impurities to this particular intrinsic semiconductor to increase conductivity. Then what we get? Extrinsic semiconductors. So these are semiconductors doped by adding or doping. The process of adding impurity is called as doping. Okay, this is obtained by adding or doping the pure semiconductors with small amount of certain specific impurity atoms. These are called as extrinsic semiconductors. Very simple types over here. So according to classification of semiconductors, you have two types. One is intrinsic semiconductor, another is extrinsic semiconductor. That's it. Okay, two types over here. All right. So now we will look into intrinsic and eccentric semiconductor in depth. Also make sure you learn every concept inside. Okay, learn the differences. What are the similarities and differences between intrinsic and extrinsic semiconductor? Whenever you give a definition with respect to any definition, for example, you are giving the definition for eccentric semiconductors, identify the keywords and make sure you can give definition based on any of your reference book. It's okay, but the keywords has to be there. What is an intrinsic semiconductor? Very simple. You take a pure semiconductor, right, and you dope it. Okay, you dope the pure semiconductor with some amount of other impurities. Why are you doping this particular semiconductor? To increase the conductivity. That's it. That's an intrinsic semiconductor. So these are these important words you cannot miss. You can give definition based on any of your reference books, but you cannot miss certain important terms. Alright. Now, before we go into learning about what is an intrinsic semiconductor, how a semiconductor actually works, alright, all of these basics, you need to understand something about this, the electronic configuration of a silicon and a germanium atom. If you take silicon, right, the atomic number means number of protons. The number of photons in this particular atom of silicon is 14. Sorry, in the nucleus of silicon is 14. So if it's a stable, silicon, this particular atom is stable. So if it has 14 protons, then it will have 14 electrons. That's it. Okay. So how would this particular charge electronic configuration go? See, first this 1s2, the innermost orbit will have 2 electrons. After that, what will happen? 8 orbits. In the second orbit, there will be 8 electrons, right? That maximum up to 8 electrons can be filled in the second orbit, right? Then what is the third case over here? Third case, then finally, right? This is 8 plus 2 is 10. Then there is 4 more electrons that is left, right? Which means 4 electrons are in the outermost orbit of silicon. Now, any conductivity happens, only these 4 electrons in the outermost shell are responsible. Why? Their work function is low, meaning for you to remove these electrons, 4 electrons are easy because they are further away from the nucleus, right? So these 4 electrons that you're talking about, the 4 electrons in the outermost shell, these are the ones responsible for conductivity. Okay. Now similarly, if you take germanium, okay, its atomic number is 32, which means the number of electrons it will have is also 32. Okay, so again, if you look at the outermost shell over here, how many electrons are there? 4 electrons are there. And these 4 electrons are the only one responsible for conductivity in germanium. Okay, so remember, that is why we take this germanium and silicon. Now, what is the use of learning about this? Let's see, let's understand for an intrinsic semiconductor, let's understand intrinsic semiconductor through a valency bond model. Which means we will either take a silicon semiconductor, or we will take a germanium semiconductor, and let's see how electrons are placed in its semiconductor lattice over here. Okay, now this +4 over here just indicates there are 4, okay, there are 4 electrons, okay, there are 4 electrons in the outermost shell. Okay, that is what we have indicated as +4 over here. So there are 4 electrons, I mean these are the 4 electrons in the outermost shell. So which means there are 4, we have just indicated +4 to talk about to specify the nucleus of the atom. Okay, how many protons are there? The excess proton it has, right? So till here there is a filled number over here. So this 4 electrons, okay, because of this we are writing the center as 4 + 4 over here. Now there are 4 electrons, right? If you take one atom, 4 electrons in the valency shell. Let it be silicon or germanium. We are not talking about the one inside, the filled orbits we are not talking. We are talking only about the outermost orbits over here. Okay, so the outermost orbit over here has 4 electrons. Similarly, you take another atom in the silicon, okay, they have 4 electrons. Likewise, okay, what we notice, okay, each electron over here forms a covalent bond with the neighboring electron. So you look at the centermost atom over here. What tends to happen? This electron forms a covalent bond with the neighboring electrons, right? So these 4 electrons, because in this outermost electron, there is only 4 electrons. 4 more electrons can be shared, right? +4 over here, which means there is 4 more electrons that can be filled in the state. 4 more electrons that can be filled in the state again, right? So what we do? We indicate that by saying this one atom shares, right, forms 4 covalent bonds with the neighboring atom. Okay, so this one is basically, okay, this particular crystal lattice is something that looks like a diamond like crystal lattice, and the atoms of silicon or germanium, if you take, they are tetrahedrally bonded. Tetra means 4, okay, tetrahedrally bonded, they form tetrahedral covalent bonds with their neighboring 4 atoms. Very simple. Okay, under normal condition, this is how the crystal lattice looks. Now, if you want to remove the electrons from this particular atom over here, what we want to do? Very simple. Increase the temperature. 2 ways. Apply an electric field, or you can increase the temperature. Now, because of thermal agitation, what will tend to happen is, somewhere because temperature is increasing, okay, somewhere because the temperature is increasing, one electron can get thermally excited, okay. This electron over here is basically thermally generated free electron because there is a rise in temperature, okay. This is basically the thermally generated free electron, okay. This is generated, okay, let me just quickly write this. This is the thermally generated free electron over here. Now, if this is the thermally generated free electron means, okay, this electron is thermally generated. So what happens to this place over here? There is a vacancy here, right? So there is a vacancy, which means there is a deficit of an electron here. There is one electron that can come and occupy this place. So what does it mean? There is a deficit. So because of the temperature, thermally, okay, under normal temperature also, because of this, okay, what happens? Because of thermal excitation, one electron leaves. One electron completely leaves. It breaks the bond over here, and one electron completely leaves the system, okay, which means what this actually means is one electron from this valency bond has moved outside, and this is free. This electron over here, since it's moved outside, there is a vacancy for this spot in the outermost shell, and that one electron is available for conduction. Okay, that is what we mean by thermally generated free electron. Now what happens in this case? There is a hole there, right? There is a vacancy there. Now this vacancy, okay, this positive electron charge that is created by the vacancy of electron, this place, this is called as hole. And because it says there is a vacancy of electron, this hole is a positive charge. It's not like a proton. Okay, it is just a positive charge, meaning there is a deficit of electron in that place, or vacancy of electron, and some other electron can come and move it, can move into this place. Okay, very simple. Now, what if, okay, let's say we are thermally exciting this particular material again. Okay, we are thermally exciting this particular material again. Okay, what happened is, because of thermal excitation, one electron got removed. So there is a hole there. Now what will happen is, some other electron will jump into its place. Okay, so that electron, when it goes here, this one is thermally generated. That's it. This one is thermally generated and it's out. Okay, thermally generated free electrons that is available for conduction. Now in this place where there was a vacancy, now another electron is moved there. So what has happened to this hole over this place over here? Now there is a vacancy here. So this is nothing but the hole. So what happens over here is, we take hole to be a positive charge, and in a semiconductor the conductivity is because of two charges. One is electrons, that is the thermally generated electrons, which are negative charged particles. Now because this electron has left the site over here, right, which means when the electron left the site, there was a hole that is actually created, that is a vacancy that is created. That vacancy that created, we call it as a hole, and it's a positive charge. Now here in case of an semiconductor, right, in case of a semiconductor, the total current, what is the total current generated from a semiconductor? This is clearly because of, okay, current generated because of electron. Why current generated because of electron? Because we have removed some electron by thermal excitation. These are available for conduction. You just have to, for example, let's say you have a semiconductor device, you just apply a potential difference. That's it. These electrons will start to move, right, they'll drift towards one particular direction. We have electronic current. Now as we have this electronic current, that is because of electrons, similarly we also have current generated by this positive charge, that is hole. So this positive charge is not like a proton, this is just vacancy of an electron. Okay, right? So how are you getting this particular hole over here? How are you getting this particular hole current? Very simple. Look at this case over here. In the first case, when this electron got thermally generated, right, there was a hole created over here. Now this electron from here jumps into this side. Now the hole moves down, right? Earlier hole was here. When this electron jumped there, the hole moved this side, right? So if electron moves one step forward, hole moves one step backward. That's it. Hole is also moving in one similar direction, right? Charge is moving in one particular direction. That's it. That will again give you the current. So the total current in a semiconductor is because of electronic current as well as hole current. Okay, this is how you can, this is the basic principle of working behind your intrinsic semiconductors. But again, okay, let's take this particular intrinsic semiconductor. We were able to thermally excite one atom, right? Now what we will do, we will go to some other site, and let's say we are going to excite this atom also. Let's say this atom also left. So in its place, what we will have? We will basically have a hole again over here, right? So somewhere again, let's say in one other place, okay, in one other place, let's say somewhere over here also, let's say this electron also left the system. So what we will have over here? Another hole. So how many number of electrons that are leaving the system, so many number of holes are generated. Here 3 electrons left because of thermal excitation, right, at normal temperature, or when the temperature increased, 3 electrons left its valency shell. Because 3 electrons left valency shell, 3 holes were were basically created. So the how many number of electrons are there, that the electron density is equal to the hole density. Okay, this is nothing but the total number of intrinsic, this is the concentration of total number of charges, but this is an intrinsic semiconductor, so we can call this as total number of intrinsic charge carriers. So if there are 100 electrons, 100 holes can be generated. If there are 10 to the power of 10 electrons, 10 to the power of 10 holes can be generated. So how many holes you are generating, that completely depends upon how many electrons are there. Okay, so this puts a restriction on the conductivity of what is the conductivity of a semiconductor. Okay, because intrinsic semiconductors, if you see, if you look at what is their intrinsic charge carrier, how many charge carrier are there in per meter cube. If you take a volume of per meter cube, in there you will have around 10 to the power of 6 charges. That's it. So this is very low conductivity level. Okay, since this is a very low conductivity level over here, okay, because this number of electrons, how many number of electrons are there, depending on it, so many number of holes can be generated. Nothing more can be generated from here, right? This puts a restriction on this puts a restriction on conductivity of intrinsic semiconductors. So conductivity itself is low. Somewhere we want to change this conductivity. Okay, we want to increase conductivity. That is where the process of doping comes into picture. You're deliberately adding impurity to a pure semiconductor, that is an intrinsic semiconductor. Why? The only reason is you want to increase conductivity. This is doping. Very important definition, go through it. Okay, what is the impurity atom that you're adding? That is a dopant. Now, the semiconductor doped with impurity atoms, these are called as, when you take an intrinsic semiconductor, add impurity atom to it, then we call that semiconductor as extrinsic or doped semiconductors. We don't use the term doped semiconductor much, we usually use the term extrinsic semiconductor. Okay, the method of adding semiconductors are different. Okay, so one thing what you can do is, you can take a sample of intrinsic semiconductor, bring it to a molten stage, and into that you can add some other element, which is going to be your dopant. Okay, or the impurity atom. Okay, and you can mix it. That is one way of adding impurity. So there are 2 or 3 ways in which you can add impurity. That's just one way of adding doping. But this definition for doping is very, very important. Now, before we go into extrinsic semiconductor, so you dope an intrinsic semiconductor, you get an extrinsic semiconductor. Semiconductor doped with some suitable impurities because you want to increase the number of charge carriers, or because you want to increase the conductivity. This is called as an extrinsic semiconductor. There are 2 types of extrinsic semiconductor. One is an N-type semiconductor. These types of semiconductor depends on what are the types of dopants. So if they ask you a question as what are the types of dopants, types of dopants are actually 2 types. One we have a pentavalent dopant. Okay. Another we have is basically a trivalent dopant. Very simple. One is a pentavalent, another is a trivalent. What are the examples of pentavalent dopant? Pentavalent dopant is very simple. Arsenic, that is a pentavalent dopant. Phosphorus or lead, all of these are pentavalent. Sorry, antimony, all of these are pentavalent dopant. What is a trivalent dopant? Aluminium, indium, right? Aluminium and indium, all of these are trivalent dopant. Also boron, these are trivalent dopant. Okay, so these dopants should also have some essential requirement. So you take a silicon semiconductor. Okay, how much impurity you're adding, which means the first of all, if you're basically taking a intrinsic semiconductor, for doping that intrinsic semiconductor, the purity of the semiconductor should be very, very high. This should be the purity of an intrinsic semiconductor. To this particular semiconductor, okay, to this particular intrinsic semiconductor, okay, you are adding a dopant. Okay, you are going to dope this atom, okay, or you are going to add a dopant, that is the impurity atom, such that you are going to add 1 parts per million. That is, if you take million parts of this particular intrinsic atom, for example, million parts of silicon atom, for that 1 part you can add the dopant. That dopant can basically be what? It can be aluminium, or it can be boron, or it can be any type of dopant. It can be phosphorus. You can add any type of dopant. But the silicon or germanium atom that you are taking should be million parts. For that you can add 1 part of dopant atom. Okay, that is the first requirement. Okay, now let's say you have a crystal lattice. Okay, now let's say you have a crystal lattice. There are 4 atoms over here. Now let's say you're introducing, for example, okay, let's say you're introducing a dopant atom over here. Let's say this is silicon atom, there you're introducing a dopant atom. This dopant atom, right, should neatly replace that particular silicon atom over here. Okay, now because you are adding this dopant atom, it should by no way it should distort this crystal lattice also. So these dopant atom tends to have certain and the size. So what tends to happen? Whatever is the size of the silicon or germanium atom, the dopant atom should be of the same, nearly equal size. That is when it will not distort the crystal lattice. Okay, these are certain points with respect to the dopants. Now that we know the types of dopant, if you take a dopant and if you take a pure semiconductor, that is an intrinsic semiconductor, and if you add a pentavalent means penta means 5. Okay, which means in the valency shell of that particular atom there should be 5 electrons. If you add a pentavalent dopant, then we get a n-type semiconductor. And the next one that we have is basically the second type of inside this intrinsic semiconductor. The other type is p-type semiconductor. So in this case, if you add a trivalent dopant, okay, then we get a p-type semiconductor. Okay, so we are running short of time, so I'll give you a quick introduction of n-type and p-type. See, very simple. You take a silicon crystal lattice. You add a pentavalent impurity. Pentavalent means, see, it has 5 electrons. In the valency shell, it has 5 electrons. Okay, now what has happened? Ideally over here, the number of electrons has increased. Right? So if this was a silicon atom, it will only have 4 electrons. Now because you added some other atom, for example phosphorus. Phosphorus is a pentavalent impurity, which means in the valency shell it has 5 electrons. Now we ideally added 1 electron is already exist. So now if you thermally excite the electrons here, and let's say these electrons are leaving the system. Okay, now what will happen? Ideally, for example, in intrinsic semiconductor, how many number of electrons are there? So many number of holes were present. Right? Now what happens? You can thermally remove all these electrons. Okay, you can thermally remove all these electrons. Even then, the number of electrons will be more than number of holes. I'm going a little quickly because we are running out of time, right? So this is basically a trivalent, pentavalent. This is basically a n-type semiconductor. Why? The negative charge particles, that is electron's negative charge particle is more. So 1 electron extra donated by a pentavalent impurity for conduction over here. So in this case, number of electrons are more, so they becomes the majority charge carriers. Now number of holes over here is less, so they become the minority charge carriers. So if you take an semiconductor and if you dope it with the donor type atom, donor means 1 extra electron will be there. It will be a pentavalent impurity. Okay, then we call it as an n-type semiconductor. Same idea. You take an semiconductor, dope it with a trivalent impurity. Take silicon semiconductor, dope it with boron. Boron has only 3 electrons in the valency shell, so automatically there is a hole created. So now what will happen is this electron will move here to this side. As soon as this electron moves here to the side, what happens over here? Right, a hole is generated. So in this case, okay, now you thermally excite all these electrons and remove them. That is okay. Okay, now let's say you removed 2 electrons and you thermally removed 2 electrons. Okay, but look at this. The number of charge carriers for electrons, okay, so 2 electrons are available for conduction, but how many holes are available over here? 3 holes are available, right? So the number of holes are more than the number of electrons. Then such a type of semiconductors, because the positive charge carriers are more, we call it as a p-type semiconductor. So majority charge carriers here is hole, minority charge carriers are electrons. The atom over here is a trivalent impurity atom, meaning it can accept an electron. Okay, so it's an acceptor type atom, and semiconductors doped with acceptor type impurities, these are called as p-type semiconductors. Very simple. Okay, so these are the 2 types of semiconductors. I've given a quick introduction. Okay, I've given a quick brief about these topics. All right. So let's end today's class with certain basic. Let's end today's class with some basic MCQs. So you can actually try to answer whatever we have learned today. The MCQs is based on that only. Okay, you can give your answers in the chat box. What are the types of semiconductors? What do you think are the types of semiconductors? Very simple over here. intrinsic semiconductors, extrinsic semiconductors. These are the types of semiconductors, both A and B. Okay, next question. Which of the following uses a dopant? Which of the following semiconductor uses a dopant? Intrinsic semiconductor, extrinsic semiconductor, organic semiconductor, none of them. Intrinsic semiconductors are pure semiconductors. It does not have any impurities. To this intrinsic semiconductor, you add a dopant, you will get an extrinsic semiconductor. So, extrinsic semiconductors uses dopant. Okay, right. Next one. The vacancy, okay, the vacancy of electron with an effective positive charge, positive electronic charge. What is this called as? This is called as nothing but hole. See, when there is a vacancy of electron, what will happen? At that site, we say there is a positive electronic charge. That is nothing but a hole. Okay, holes represent there is a vacancy of electron. Okay, now next question. The process of deliberate addition of desirable impurities to a pure semiconductor so as to increase its conductivity is called doping. Extrinsic semiconductor, intrinsic semiconductor, it's called as doping. The process is called as doping. Okay, so which of the following statement are essential requirement of a doping semiconductor? The semiconductor material that you're choosing, that you want, which semiconductor you're taking that you're going to dope, that semiconductor material should have very high purity. That is correct. Okay, this is one of the essential requirement. The concentration of dopant should be very high. This is wrong. Okay, out of it should be 1 parts per million. That is, if you take million parts of silicon semiconductor, if you take a germanium semiconductor, for million parts of that electron, you can add 1 part of some any impurities. Okay, that could be aluminum, that could be boron, any impurity, but just you can add 1 part. So this is wrong. The size of dopant and semiconductor atom must be the same size. Yes, because it shouldn't distort the crystal lattice. The dopant atom should distort the crystal lattice. This is not true. So both A and C are correct. Okay, next question. What are the types of dopant? Pentavalent is actually a type of dopant. Trivalent is a type of dopant. Tetravalent is basically how the silicon or germanium atom look, right? This means valency electron. There are 4 valency electron. This is 5 and this is 3 valency electron. So both A and B, these are right. These are the types of dopant, trivalent and pentavalent. What are the types of extrinsic semiconductors? P-type and N-type, both B and C, A and B. These are the 2 types of extrinsic semiconductors. Okay, semiconductor doped with donor type impurities. Donor means, okay, it is giving 1 additional charge. Okay, so donor type means 1 additional charge. So which is the one that gives the donor type impurity? Very simple. That is basically your N-type semiconductor. See this N-type semiconductor over here, right? In this N-type semiconductor, when you added this one particular atom, instead of 4 valency electron, you have 1 valency electron extra. This is a donor impurity. Okay, this is basically a donor impurity. So over here, the semiconductor doped with donor type impurities gives you an N-type semiconductor. Okay, very simple. So with this, I am stopping today's class. So go down to the link. In the description, in the link below, will take you to the Unacademy site, and there are a lot of special classes that are happening for free. Special classes are completely free. You can also take those classes as well. So do enroll for them as well, and I'll see you all in the next class. So if you like the video, do share it among with your friends. Okay, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell icon so you'll get notification before any class goes live. Alright, I'll see you all in the next class. Bye, take care.